righty then. It is just after 8:30. It is Sunday morning. I am Ron. So that must mean that this is Sunday Morning Live with Ron. How about that? I'm Ron Olcott of Ron Olcott Photography.com. I come here most every Sunday morning to talk to y'all for about an hour or so. We start at 8:30. We go end by 9:30 at the latest. Welcome, everybody. I already saw somebody come in and drop back out on Facebook. So they're bouncing in and out on Facebook before I even start. But be that as it may. See, this is like a politician move, okay? This is how politicians point things, because pointing is bad when you're doing public speaking, so people do this, okay? Don't ever mistake this. This means this. But what do we do? What is Sunday Morning Live with Ron? Well, I get out here, I sit in my backyard, and I drink coffee. And since I was doing that anyway, I thought I'd talk to you while I was doing it. I introduced the 5 new pieces that will be added to my website this week, as well as talk about tips on making your photography better, and then show you some of my photography. Now today, we're kind of wrapping up a chapter on composition for the tips. So I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I also had a fan ask me how I got into photography. So I thought I would share that, since the lesson I think is going to be a bit short. And instead of trying to take more pictures of my backyard with you, I am going to show you some pictures that I took on a recent photo shoot and talk about them in terms of what we've learned about our photography so far. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. I'll also give you some news and information and recaps of what's going on elsewhere in the business. And with that, let's go ahead and jump right into the new images. Okay. This first one is called The Color of Dirt, or just Color of Dirt. Taken on Lori Bluff Trail, Pacifica, California. It is just an outcropping of some of the underlying stone through the gravel on the side of a hill. And it just had some marvelous, marvelous colors to it. And I've always been fascinated by rocks. In 9th grade, I had earth science and geology. Just fascinated me. I like crystals. I like rocks. I like, looking at different rock formations in the landscape and trying to figure out how that happened. So I saw this. I had to take a picture, and so I took a picture, and now I'm subjecting you to it. Once again, Color of Dirt. Our next one is called Friendly Mascot. And I actually have been missing this guy. This guy right now is wrapped up with all of the stuff that I'm supposed to be taking to my art fairs, which are not happening this summer. He's all wrapped up in bubble wrap in my garage, waiting to be packed up and used as my mascot at my art fairs. This is a little ceramic statue. I don't have a actual rabbit wrapped up in bubble wrap in my garage. That would not be cool. But this statue is wrapped up in my garage, and I was missing him. So I found this picture of him, and he's going to be included this week. I don't even know. My ex-wife bought this. She will probably go nuts when she sees that I ended up with it, not her, but too bad. So this is Friendly Mascot. This was taken here in my backyard, very close to where I'm sitting right now. This next one is Wholesome Goodness. This is some home-baked, whole grain, hearty bread that I made, and I do make. It's also a reminder that we're coming up on June 30th, which is the end of my campaign for raising money for COVID-19 relief. And I want to let you know that I have extended that now out through July 31st. My stay at home has now been extended to August 3rd. They're not bringing me back into the office until August. So I also am extending my COVID fundraiser. In case you don't know, the COVID fundraiser, 20% of net proceeds of everything that I sell on my site from now until I get out of my stay-at-home order goes to directrelief.org, which is a 501c3 organization that provides medical supplies and equipment, both in the U.S. and around the world, and it will go to their COVID-19 relief fund. So, and it's also a very pretty picture, and it makes me hungry because it's breakfast time. Wholesome Goodness. Okay. Our fourth picture this week is called Racing Around to Come Up Behind You. This is a sunset picture that I took at the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Preserve Refuge. I forget. Anyway, it's up by Davis, California, just outside of, sits between Davis and Sacramento, California. And on the solstice this year, I went up there to take some wildlife pictures and to take some sunset pictures on the solstice, because I thought that would be very, very cool. And a few of them came out nice, and some of them did not. And that's actually what we're going to be doing today, is we're going to be looking at that photo shoot in terms of what went well and what didn't go well, to show you sort of the outcomes that I get at this stage in real live photo shoots. The name, of course, is a reference to the famous Pink Floyd song Time. So I'm not sure it's going to stick when I actually publish it. A little worried about copyright things these days. So, but its working title today is Racing Around to Come Up Behind You. Okay. And then the fifth picture this week comes to us from Yosemite. It is, of course, Half Dome. And I call this one Between Two Trees, a play on Mark Maron's series, a podcast series, or called, I guess it's not a podcast, it's a YouTube series called Between Two Ferns. This is taken from Glacier Point in the fall. And I mean, it's Half Dome. If you don't know what Half Dome is, you don't know what Yosemite is. I strongly urge you, as soon as it gets more open, to go there. Right now, it is partially open. They are, though, on a strict reservation system, and they only are allowing a relatively few number of visitors per day into the park. I still am not going because I am very sure that those relatively few number of visitors are all gathering in the same relatively few number of designated viewing spots. But I can't wait to get back to Yosemite, one of my favorite spots in the world. Just an incredibly powerful place to be. Okay, so those are the 5 pictures this week. Once again, just to recap, between 2 trees, racing around to come up behind you, Wholesome Goodness, Friendly Mascot, and The Color of Dirt. Okay. So those are the new images that are going to be going on the site this week. That will definitely be Monday morning. Not going to make it this afternoon. I was up early this morning, and I expect this afternoon is going to be treated to nap time. But they'll be coming up soon. So that's one of the 3 things that we do every week. Plus this week I promised you a bonus. As you can see in the trees behind me, there's a little bit of breeze coming up. So I think I'm still good. But if you see me jump suddenly, it's because I have my good monitor out here so I can see what I'm doing on Sunday mornings. And if the breeze comes up hard, I'm going to jump and save my monitor. So just so you know what's happening if that happens. The next thing to know is we usually give tips about improving your photography. So because we've wrapped up a big chunk, I wanted to recap. This is actually week number 13 that we've done this. So I just wanted to recap what we've been through so that you remember all the tips that I've given. The first couple of weeks, I went through first the camera that I took to Europe. So all of my Europe pictures were taken with a Canon PowerShot SX720S. And I talked about why I picked that camera. It's compact size, it's light, but it has a massive zoom, up to 400 times. And it takes very sharp pictures. It has a pretty good resolution at 20 megapixels. And it worked very well for where I was at in my skill level and what I needed for that trip. I didn't want to carry a lot of weight. I didn't want to bother with changing lenses. So that's what I had with me in Europe. Since then, I bought a Sony a6000, and I talked about that, and I've shown you using that, and I went through some of the major operation modes on that for a couple of weeks. And then I started actually into photography tips. So the first photography tips that we talked about was how to get a sharp picture. Okay. Now you'll hear and see a lot of people who are very interested in getting off of automatic mode. Don't rush to get off of automatic mode. Okay. Automatic mode on today's cameras is really good. Okay. So there are some basic skills that you need to master before you hurry to get off of automatic mode. And the first one is how to get a sharp picture. Okay. And the first trick to getting sharp picture is your camera has got to be steady. And we talked about how to hold your camera. Okay, and we're going to pretend my coffee mug is a camera right now. Okay, actually, let's do this. We're going to use the phone because a lot of people take pictures with their phones. I'm actually watching Instagram on my phone, so I can see if anybody comments on Instagram. But short pictures. We talked about getting your elbows in close to your body and holding your phone, your camera still that way. Right? Or propping up against. I've got a little side table over here. Okay. Using something steady to hold you steady so you're not relying on you being steady. Or even what I'm doing now, which is sitting down, okay, and propping in that makes you even more steady. Okay. And then we talked about using a tripod. Okay, you can't see it, but the Sony a6000 over here is sitting on a tripod, and it's very steady. Mr. Oleander is not this week. Mr. Oleander is blowing around in the breeze, but it's sitting on a tripod, so that keeps it steady. So if you're inside or any place where there's low light, you're taking pictures in the evening or at night, you're not going to be able to hold it manually steady enough. So you'll want to set your camera on a table or set it up on a tripod or some other physical object, because in order to get enough light, your camera is going to slow down the shutter, okay? Which means any little bit of movement is going to create blur in your picture. So we'll talk about that. That, in fact, was the next chapter that we went into, is we talked about the exposure triangle, okay? And you see me do this every single week, where we have aperture, which is how big is the opening that comes into your, that lets the light into your camera, okay? We talked about exposure, or how fast your shutter opens and closes, okay? And we talked about ISO, which is the sensitivity of the sensor in your camera. Just 1 second. There we go. As I talk, I get a little bit of a tickle here in my throat. And if you saw those lessons, you'll remember that we had this tool here that we used to simulate those different modes. We talked about the aperture, or how big the opening is, okay, to let in a lot of light, and you get a very blurry background. Or as you make the opening smaller, okay, excuse me, my medicine's kicking in and things are starting to move in my sinuses. You see that these background dots actually resolve into single points of light. Okay, so small aperture, sharp background, great depth of field, so you have focus from front to back. Excuse me. Okay, and then a low aperture number. Remember, this is a ratio. Okay, so a low number means a big aperture. A high number means a small aperture. Okay, so if we're at f1.8, then f3.6 would be half that big. Okay, f4, f8 would be half that big, and so on. So an f1 would mean 100% of the aperture is open. All right. And then we talked about using shutter speed, okay, and how you can use shutter speed to control the amount of blur. And even as we get faster and faster. And again, this is a ratio, okay? 1/500th of a second, 1/1000th of a second. Okay? And we can use that to stop the motion of this spinning top, all right? Or we can consciously choose to not stop that motion, or maybe stop it there and give a hint of this star in the center, all right? So you can use shutter speed when things are moving to create effects like that. 1 second again. I'll find the picture. There. I was clicking the wrong buttons. All right. So that's shutter speed. And then as you change the sensitivity, a higher number here means more sensitive. Okay. So if we have ISO 1600, then we either have to stop down our aperture and or take a faster picture to get proper exposure. Okay. You'll also notice that as our ISO gets higher, okay, that our picture gets grainy. This noise here is all created at those higher sensitivities. Okay, so you can get the picture, but it will turn out grainy. So if you don't want grain, then you need to keep your aperture stuck, your ISO sensitivity stuck at 400 to 800. Okay, which means you have to open up your aperture. Which means you're not going to get that sharp background. Okay, or if you're trying to get a sharp background, you're going to have to slow down your shutter. Okay, remember how I talked just a second ago? We were talking about being steady with your camera. That if you're in low light situations, you want to use a tripod or some sort of surface because your shutter speeds are going to slow down. And obviously, the longer the shutter is open, the more likely that any kind of tiny bit of shake will cause problems for you. Okay. There. My lovely assistant just brought me some water, so that will help more than coffee. Plus, I was out of coffee. Okay, so we had those lessons about aperture, shutter, and ISO. Okay. Then we started into composition. Okay. First rule of composition is the rule of thirds. Okay. How you can use it as zones. Okay. Fill 2/3, leave 1/3 blank, fill this zone and have the rest of it sky, or fill this zone and have the rest of it sky. Okay. And using the intersections, that the intersection points create more interest. Okay. Just to show an example of that, okay, We don't show the actual lines on here, but if you drew the rule of thirds on here, the eyes of anything that is animal, people, anything that has eyes, the eyes are always the most interesting part, and this eyeball right here lands right on that grid point right there. Okay. And then we talked about a modification of the rule of thirds, okay, that is called the golden ratio or the phi grid. Okay. Now notice how it's a little more visible here. When you go to the golden ratio, we're not strictly in thirds. These two are bigger. Okay. I don't know what all that is. Okay. And then we talked about the Fibonacci spiral, which is an outgrowth of that concept. This idea of if you put something right here and the rest of the picture kind of swoops into there, that will be very, very interesting. Now, the classic Fibonacci spiral, of course, is the Nautilus shell. All right. Now, I am always suspect of Fibonacci spirals because you see people drop Fibonacci spirals on all kinds of things. And frankly, I think this one's just the rule of thirds. Okay, that canoe is on the third. But, you know, they'll drop this spiral on here and go, oh, look, Fibonacci spiral. So you can drop a Fibonacci spiral on anything. That does not mean that the composition works off of that principle. But people do it. Who am I to argue? Okay. Then we talked about leading lines. Okay. And how you can use lines in photography to bring the eye to specific points. Okay. These lines here help to bring your eye up to this house. Okay. Okay. The line of the shoreline, and this becomes now an S curve. So it's not just a straight line, but it's a curved line that brings you off into infinity there. Okay. And there's a classic S curve. Oh man, my hands are just, why are you jumping today? Okay. And that's a leading line that isn't a straight line, it's an S curve. And S curves are even more interesting than straight lines. Could be that my mouse is just sliding. Don't know. Okay. And then last week we talked about using color. Okay. Using color, blocks of color. Oh. And we talked about geometry, okay, as well. So this lesson is geometry, okay, and using geometry. Leading lines are partly that. Squares, diamonds, triangles, spirals, circles, converging lines, okay, repeating patterns, intersecting lines, and perspective. All right. And then finally, last week we talked about color. Okay. So remember this guy using the contrasting complementary green to highlight his red hair and this color wheel. Okay, we spent a good deal of time talking about that. So that's a summary of everything that we have covered so far on our camera tips, our taking better pictures. Okay, so all of those can help you out in making your photography better. So knowing all those, what should your expectations be? we're going to look at a photo shoot that I did just last weekend on the solstice to give you an idea of, knowing all of that, how do my pictures come out when I take a whole bunch of pictures. But before we do that, I wanted to share, because I had someone ask me about how I came to be a photographer. So I wanted to share that story, since somebody asked, and preserve it for posterity, as it were. Oh, we had somebody join. Hi, Lucy. Lucy has joined from Lucy Gelfie Fine Arts. Okay, a fellow artist. Thank you for joining, Lucy. Good to see you. She's on Instagram. See, I have Instagram here because I can't see comments on Instagram on my other piece. But anyway, how did I become a photographer? The truth is, my first experience with photography, I had a hand-me-down camera that I got from my grandmother. They had stopped using it. It was an old, I believe it was called 626 Kodak film. It made negatives that were about this big. They were quite a bit larger than 35 millimeter, and they were pretty square. And you could get, the film canisters would only have about 12 pictures on them because the format was so big. And I started taking pictures with that camera. I was probably 13, 14 years old at the end of junior high, I think. So I started taking pictures with that. I learned a little bit about cameras and how they work. At that point, I was much more interested in the technology behind it, the mechanics of opening and closing shutters and things like that. Fortunately, I never had the urge to take it apart, so I had that camera for a while. I even found one time at a rummage sale somewhere an old bellows camera that I wish I still had. But it actually was about the size of first generation of Star Trek tricorders, okay, probably about that big, okay, and about that thick. And then it had a bellows. The front would flop down, and then the lens would bellows out, and that's how you would focus, okay. But when I got it, the bellows had holes in it, so I never tried to take pictures with it, but I thought it was quite interesting. Then I got, as Kodak went to the cartridge films, I had a series of Instamatics. For my high school graduation, one of my presents that I got was the real thin ones. I think those were called 440s. Shot with that for a while. But I began to lose interest because, frankly, shooting on film can get expensive, especially when you're a high school or college student, and it cut into my beer money. So, because you have to buy the film, and then you had to take it somewhere and have it developed. And at that point, I wasn't trying to do anything really artistically with it. I was just taking snapshots, okay? Trying to take pictures of things that I thought were interesting. But even then, I tended more towards landscapes than people. So it becoming more and more expensive, I lost interest. I would, for a lot of years, when I went on vacation, I would just buy a disposable 3 or 4 disposable cameras and take that many pictures and get back from vacation and develop those. And we would double up the prints and send some to family and send some to keep some for ourselves. So worked on cheap disposable cameras, and then eventually life just got busy, uncomplicated, and I pretty much gave up shooting pictures. Photography on phones came around, and again, sort of stopped doing the disposable cameras. Tried to do vacation photos on the phone, trying to do snapshots and record, the people I was with and stuff, and I was very, very bad at that, frankly. Then, about 3 years ago, I had a number of changes in my life, one of which included moving much closer to my work, and I suddenly had a lot more time. And I thought, I really like photography. I should try to do more of that and find out how to get better at that. In addition, at the same time, around the same time, I made plans to go to Europe for 3 weeks. I said, well, if I'm going to Europe, this is probably not going to be something that I do every day. I should really, really get serious about this and learn how to take pictures so that the pictures that I take will be pictures that I want to keep. Okay? I don't want to go to Europe and come back and go, God, I wish I had pictures of that, which I still do. You can never take enough pictures. But in the process of that, I actually started to learn about photography, and that's where I started to learn about the rule of thirds and composition, and being able to take pictures in low light and use leading lines. While I was in Europe, I actually went on a tour with a photographer, which was supposed to be a group tour, but it ended up just being me. So I spent 3 hours getting tutored by a professional photographer. And I came back and I started looking at them. And I said, yeah, these are pretty good, some of these. And I actually had a friend encourage me and say, you have something there. You look at things a little bit differently than other people do. And as I've started putting my work out there, I have had other people say the same things, that I get just a little bit different perspective than other people would see. And a lot of that I credit to the prompt that I always give myself, which is look up, look down, look all around. Okay? It's like anybody can take a picture of Half Dome. Literally tens of thousands of people a year take pictures of half domes. Okay? Not everybody chooses to frame it between two trees. It's a little bit different perspective. It gives you a little bit different look. So, and I try not to just take the big picture. I'll take a picture of a little small detail, or I'll take a picture looking up through something at the sky. Okay? So while everybody is at Glacier Point shooting out at Yosemite Valley, I'm shooting the end of a stump. Okay, and that became Tree Down 1 and 2. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Again, as I said, you can never take enough pictures, and you can never stop learning. Okay? I am still learning. I feel like my photography is getting better every time I go out. So hopefully some of you agree. But to that end, so we've talked about 2 of the 3 things, plus the bonus that I promised this week. I showed you the pictures. Okay. Again, just to recap, start at the beginning here. The color of dirt, Friendly Mascot, Wholesome Goodness, Racing Around to Come Up Behind You, Between Two Trees are the pictures this week. Okay. We recapped all of the lessons that I gave so far. I told you about it, why and how I became a photographer. Normally, this would be the point in the show where I would grab my camera and show you some pictures of my backyard. Okay, but we're 13 episodes into this, so I thought I would do something a little bit different rather than just show you more of my backyard and try to demonstrate all of those techniques in 10 minutes to 15 minutes. I thought what I would do is I would show you a recent photo shoot that I took up to a wilderness area near me on the summer solstice. Now, unfortunately, I can't blow any of these pictures up. Is that any better? No, it's better this way. But on the solstice, I went up to Yolo Bypass Wilderness area, which sits between Davis, California and Sacramento, California, along a bypass of the Sacramento River. That they are restoring to natural wetlands, and they've set up as a wildlife refuge. So one thing that I have not gotten good at yet is shooting pictures of birds, and they have lots of birds. So I went there with two goals: bird pictures and sunset pictures of the solstice. So I want to go through these. There's 147 of them. We're not going to talk about them in detail, but I am going to talk about a little bit about what went well and what didn't go so well on some of these pictures. All right. So here on these smaller ones, let me blow up as big as I can. So here we have a whole series of some sort of what I believe to be an egret. Okay. And he was just fishing in a ditch as I went by. So, sorry, on YouTube, you're not, or on Instagram, you're not seeing all of these. But as you can see, some of them, they're not really very interesting pictures, okay? With his neck extended all the way out, okay? That's not a great picture of a bird, okay? Sometimes he crooked his neck in, okay? But this is just really too tight to see much of anything, okay? But when I get over to this one, his neck makes that really nice S. I really like that picture. Over here, this one, really nice S. Okay. Here he is, and actually got his head up so that the setting sun highlights his head. Okay, that's a nice picture. Now these, it was still light out, so these are all handheld. Okay, he started climbing up the bank. Okay, and you see at one point he got up on top of the bank so that the whole setting sun, which was coming from this side over here, highlighted his whole body, and he had his head in that beautiful S curve. That will probably be the first of the egret pictures that end up on my website. Okay. And then he walked away. So I still took a bunch of pictures because you can't have too many pictures. And then he walked back down in the ditch. Okay. And these just aren't interesting. Okay. The lighting's not right. Okay. Colors aren't right. So then this one's hard to see. Something to start noting. A tip that I haven't shared is always make sure that you're cleaning your lens often. It was windy that day. I was on a dirt road, and you can start to see, and it gets worse as we go, that I was getting dust on my lens. Okay. But there was this other egret. He's flying in here somewhere. but he was on the side of the road, actually up on the road, as you can see over here. Okay. And I got ready because I saw this car coming and I knew he was going to take off. So I tried to capture him in flight. What did I learn? I learned that I did not have anywhere near fast enough shutter speed to capture him in flight. Okay. So I got him. Okay. But he's blurry. Okay. That means my shutter speed was not fast enough. I could not get the picture that I wanted out of it. Okay. That would have been a great shot if the shutter speed was a little bit faster and I stopped his action, but I didn't. Okay. So I took a bunch more pictures, some landscape pictures, trees and flowers and trees, different perspectives, shooting up, shooting down, in close-ups of the flowers with the rice paddy in the background, different exposures. Okay, got too close to the sun there, it overexposed. Okay, cut the exposure down too much. This is where I somehow got a great big gob on my lens. It's going to be there throughout all the pictures, but we can fix that in post-production. Okay. This is actually the city of Sacramento in the distance. Did some close-ups of the flowers. Okay. But you can see here, while the light was out and I had a fairly good shutter speed, these were all handheld. And actually, no, these were tripod. And they came out pretty steady. Even with a breeze going, the shutter speed was fast enough to stop the motion of those flowers. Okay, this was a rice farm off in the distance. And then we start getting into the sunset. This was a drainage ditch. Okay, just stopped to take some pictures there. Okay, a bird flew over, nowhere near ready for that. So I tried to capture him, but as you can see, he's moving too fast. I was moving too fast. None of the bird pictures there came out clear at all. So I definitely need to go and practice bird pictures a lot more. Okay. Even this one, he almost looks like he would be redeemable, but he isn't. As you look at it closer, he's way out of focus, and then he got out of distance. So I went back to shooting things that don't move, which I've gotten somewhat good at. Okay. Notice here, rule of thirds. Got this dark area on this third. The other 2/3 are lighter. Okay. Leading line, taking you off in the distance here. Okay. And then we get seriously into the sunset. I moved. The park actually closes at sunset, and I mean right at the stroke of sunset. I had moved out so that I was just inside the gate, and the ranger came right at the designated sunset time and suggested that I move outside the gate. She would have let me stay there. She just didn't want me to have to move my tripod and everything over the gate. So, and I took a lot of sunset pictures, and some of them came out okay. It was still pretty bright as I took these. Okay, the sky was just gorgeous, but you start to see as it got darker, and it's a little bit hard to see in these preview modes, but some of these pictures are just unusable because they're fuzzy. And it's not because the camera autofocus failed. Okay? And it's not because I was holding it by hand. I had it on a tripod for all of these things. But I was experimenting with different shutter speeds. And when I slowed my shutter speed down, what I did not do is go to a remote trigger or a timer, so that if I'm taking a picture for a second or more, the actual act of touching the shutter caused it to shake and caused me to get some really blurry pictures. Okay. And the wind was blowing pretty good. And you can see as time goes on that the pictures just get dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. Again, can fix a lot of that in post-production. And that's actually going to be the next module, is going to be post-production. Okay, so here's one. That would be a really nice picture, except that it's fuzzy. Okay? These are all fuzzy. Fuzzy, fuzzy, fuzzy. I was very, very frustrated the first time I looked at these, at how many of them just, they're not good, okay? Because I shook the camera, because I didn't do the technique that I knew I should have done. This one here, that's just boring, okay? Similar here. I thought I could get an interesting leading line to something. It's just, there's no interesting color there. There's no, it's washed out. It's not an interesting picture, okay? So I went back to the sunset. Again, had a lot of trouble with camera shake giving me fuzzy pictures. Okay. But it was a beautiful, beautiful sunset. So I now know a good place that is not 4 hours away that I can get good sunset pictures, okay, with a pretty clear horizon. Okay, and I took some zoomed in, I took some wide angle. Okay, this is a huge wide angle shot. Okay, that's probably close to 140 degrees of art. But like this one over here, I zoomed in a bit. And of course, the more you zoom in, the more susceptible you are, the more any little bit of shake is going to affect your camera. Okay, so all of these where I zoomed in and tried to get this really red spot on the horizon just came out blurry because I shook the camera, but simply by touching the shutter. Okay. The ones that are zoomed out are not so bad, okay, but fuzzy, 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 but bad subject. Okay, but you try, because right now with digital photography, taking a picture doesn't cost you anything. All right, but every once in a while you get one like this last shot. Okay, and that is the shot that turned into racing around to come up behind you. Okay. So even though that's 147 pictures, out of that, probably 80 of them are sharp, and maybe a dozen are going to turn into interesting pictures. So set expectations. It doesn't cost anything to take pictures. Take a lot of pictures everywhere you go. Something that's hard to remember in the moment is this is never going to happen again. You can go back to the same spot. It will be different. Okay. So don't be afraid to take a lot of pictures. At the same time, don't be the person who misses life because you've got your nose stuck into a viewfinder. Be sure you look at what you're experiencing so that you know that experience. You've got that experience internalized. Then pick up your camera. Look at what's around you and say, how can I tell this story of what it's telling to me? Okay. How can I show this wonderful thing, or this horrible thing, or this beautiful thing, or this ugly thing? How can I tell that story so that somebody else can feel just a little bit of what I feel when I see that? And I got to tell you, I have a running joke with my girlfriend about I hate when artists talk about art like it's this big cosmic thing, but I don't talk about my art that way very much. But I will talk about the world that way. Just the wonder of going someplace extreme like Yosemite, or just the beauty of a sunset. I went to this sunset uh, and goodbye Instagram. Instagram just fell off, just so you know. Uh, and because Instagram has a 1 hour limit, so uh, they just quit. But I will. When I took these, that's where I was. When I took these sunset pictures, okay, at about 8:40, I guess, was official sunset. Okay? And at that time, there were probably a dozen or so of us up on top of this levee. We were all spread out so that we weren't in any COVID danger. But there were a lot of people up there looking at it. Okay. And by 8:47, I was the only one left up there. And I've got to tell you, all of the interesting pictures that I took happened after all the other people left. Make your own art. Okay. Look and see what's happening. Be in the moment. So that's our show. I'm not going to do any shows next week. Okay. We've stopped the Friday weeklies for the happy hour. Not going to do those weekly. Going to cut those back to once a month. So nothing on next Friday. And I'm going to not do this show next Sunday just to take a vacation and free up my weekend to spend some time. But after that, so the 12th of July, be back here on Sunday morning, and we're going to start into learning how to do post-production on your pictures, okay? How to take the pictures that you took and make them even better, okay? So be sure that you're back here for that. Be sure that you watch the replay for last Friday's virtual gallery show. There is a discount code hidden in there. Not hidden, it's great big on the screen, but you got to watch the video to see it. To see that discount code, and I've extended that discount code all the way to June 30th. If you like any of the artist proofs that are on sale in that, you still have a chance to be the first to comment. You can watch that video. It will tell you how to do it. You can see it on YouTube. You can see it on Facebook. For some reason, it's not letting me upload it right on Instagram, but hopefully soon you will see it on Instagram. But the offers on the prints end tonight. The discount codes end June 30th. We've gone through our lesson recap. No shows next weekend. Be good to yourself. Be kind to other people. And become the person that you would like to see. It's a pretty day to be outside. Go do something nice.